All right, you're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell Blues Deluxe. And it's my honor and pleasure, as always, to have Sean Chambers on with me today. Hello, Sean.
Hey, John, man, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on the show and helping to
Anytime.
cover the live album, live from Daryl's House Club. It's an honor to be on the show, and I certainly appreciate it.
Well, let me start with the questions that I ask just about everybody up front. Growing up, where did you grow up, and what were you listening to as a kid growing up?
Well, I'm an original Floridian. I was born on the East Coast in Melbourne, Florida. My dad was an engineer at the Kennedy Space Center for about 6 years or so. And then when I was, 6 or 7 years old, I was a young kid. My family relocated to Tampa, and I grew up in Tampa. So I kind of consider Tampa my home, my hometown. I don't remember much about Melbourne growing up. And then, I wanted to play guitar. I knew that from a young age. And my parents got me a guitar when I was 11 years old. I started playing by ear. I didn't know the first thing about the blues at that young age. I was listening to mostly classic rock songs, back in the day, Zeppelin and Boston, and, being from Florida, bands like Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers and Tom Petty. And and then some heavier stuff, even Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Ozzy. Growing up as a kid, I liked all that stuff. I still like a lot of that stuff. So I was playing, trying to figure out the power chords and playing by ear. And a few years had went by. I think I was 14 or 15 years old. And I was still noodling around on guitar, trying to, find my way and my path and what I really wanted to do. And a buddy of mine was about a year and a half older than me, and he had just got his driver's license. He was 16 years old and just turned 16. His dad got him one of those old Pintos, an old pea green Pinto.
I remember them.
But it was like a brand new limousine to us in those days, So he called me up and said, "Man, I got my license and my dad got me a car. Can I pick you up? We'll go for a ride." I go, "Yeah, heck yeah." So I think I was 14 and a half, 15 at the time. So he picked me up and he put in a cassette tape. And the first song that came on was Red House by Jimi Hendrix. And I was that's the first time literally that the hairs on my arm stood up.
Yeah, you're going, what was that? What is this?
Exactly. It's exactly what I said. I said, "What kind of music is this? And who is this?" He said, "It's blues music. It's Jimi Hendrix." And I knew right then and there that this is what I've been searching for. It's like I was learning to play guitar, but more power chords and, playing rhythm along with my favorite songs and stuff. But when I heard Hendrix, I said, "Man, that's it right there. That's what I want to do." So I was on a big Hendrix kick for about 2 years. And then a buddy of mine played me a version of Voodoo Child. And he goes, "You know who this is?" And just out of instinct, I had heard it for about 2 or 3 seconds. I said, "Yeah, it's Hendrix." He goes, "No, it's not."
Stevie Ray.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then as I listened to it, I was like, "Stevie who?" He said, "Stevie Ray Vaughan." And I listened and I was like, holy. And then the hair on my arm stood up again. So I discovered Stevie, And then I started figuring out, learning about Stevie's influences, like, Albert Collins and, Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters, Lightning Hopkins, Sonny Boy Williamson, all those guys. I kind of backed my way into the blues, I like to say. And that's kind of what changed my life. If I never would have got picked up that day by my buddy Phil was his name, and he didn't put in that cassette tape, I don't know, I might be a crane operator or something. I don't know today.
So when did you decide you wanted to be a full-time musician?
The more that I played and the more that I got out there and started doing some touring, and the majority of my touring really started with Hubert Sumlin. And I realized playing in front of people and the energy that it's like a full circle thing. You're feeding off the energy of the crowd and they're feeding off the energy of the band. And it's just, everybody forgets their problems for a few hours, everybody in the crowd and me as well playing the music. It's just, it's really, musical, like they said, music's a worldwide language. And So after touring for a few years and playing live, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
So tell me about Hubert Sumlin. How did that come about? How did you get into play with Hubert Sumlin?
Well, I had I had a guy named Steve Einzig, who we're still very good friends to this day, out of New York City, and he was an agent, and he still works in the music business. And he got a call from another guy that wanted to book me in Florida, and so Steve contacted me, and et cetera. And so we booked a gig, and I didn't know Steve, at the time. And he said, hey, listen, he goes, I'm going to be down in Florida, and I noticed you're playing at this place, this certain venue, and I'll come down and hang out and check out the band, because I really dig what you're doing and everything. And this was about a month before the show, before the gig that we did back then, which was like 1997, I believe. And I said, cool. And so we were loading in about a month later. We were loading into that gig, and I forgot he was even going to be there, because we hadn't talked since then, about a month prior. And he introduced himself when we were loading in and said, hey man, I'm Steve. Remember? I said, oh yeah, man. I said, it's great to meet you. Thanks for coming out. And so we played our gig. And then after the gig, he said, do you want to go grab some breakfast? I'd like to talk to you about some stuff. And those were back in the days when you played like 10 to 2 a.m. or 9:30 to 1:30, when the gigs went really late, So we went out to, I think by the time we got done packing the van up and loading out, I think we went to Denny's or something like that, or about 2:30, 3 in the morning. And he said, man, I really like your music. And he goes, do you have any material for a CD? And I said, yeah, I've got some original songs. I just, I don't have the budget or anything, or a record label. He said, well, I've got some connections to possibly get you a distribution deal. He's like, if I were to get you a distribution deal, would you want, what would you think about me financing your record? Because I really think it'd be great. And I was caught off guard, because I just thought I met a new friend and we were going to hang out. So long story short,
look at that. You get an offer you didn't even look, you weren't even expecting.
No, not a bit. And so he got us a distribution deal. And then in order to have like a proper distribution deal and all that stuff, you have to have some kind of record label. So he created his own record label, which is obviously an indie label. And he called it Vestige Records. And so then I was on Vestige Records. I was the only artist on the label. And but we had decent distribution. This was back in by the time the record actually came out, which was in the beginning of 1998, there was still record stores like Virgin Records in New York City, and Peaches Records here in Tampa and stuff where I grew up, and there was Best Buy, where I don't know if you remember the Best Buy where they had the listening stations with the new music, and you could put the headphones on. So we had
Tower Records too had it.
Yeah, Tower Records. Yeah, we were on the listening stations. I mean, my first album, and we had really good placement in a lot of these stores, and really good distribution. And so he was booking me and managing me and running the record label. And he called me one day towards it was probably August maybe of 98. My record had been out for a few months. And he called me and said, hey, I started managing Hubert Sumlin. And he's playing a festival in Memphis, Tennessee called Memphis in May. And he needs a band. So he's curious. He's actually heard your CD and likes your stuff, and wanted to know if you and your band would want to back him up at Memphis in May. And that was in October of 1998. So we had a couple months to kind of.
Did you know his history before that?
Yeah, somewhat, but not really as intense as when I started really digging deep, doing the deep dive into, I knew he was a great Chicago guitar player and he had played with Howlin' Wolf. I didn't know he was, he had written stuff like Killing Floor and, a lot of the stuff that the guys like Hendrix I grew up listening to, like I told you originally,
playing those songs,
actually covered. Yeah, and bands like Zeppelin that I listened to were doing a lot of the stuff that Hubert wrote, and that came from his time period. So anyways, I learned that very quickly after doing some research. And anyways, the band and I woodshedded for a couple months. And
how did it make you feel to know you were going to be playing with him? You were going to
be nervous. I mean, nervous and excited, you know, like this is going to be great. And I hope I don't mess up, the type of thing. So Steve, my manager at the time, and who had just picked up Hubert's manager, said that Hubert said to just learn like 80% of the popular Howlin' Wolf songs, whatever you want. Obviously, he already knows the material, and just make up a set list of about 90 minutes of Howlin' Wolf material, a few Muddy Water songs, and a few Hubert songs. So I made the list up, you know, and the band learned the songs. So come October, when we had to drive to Memphis, we had about 3 or 4 gigs booked on the way to Memphis, in Florida. And so we got to Memphis early that afternoon. We were supposed to play that night, but we weren't going to play till like 11 or 11:30. It was pretty late when we were supposed to go on stage. And Hubert was staying at the Peabody Motel in Memphis. And so we got into town, and Steve, you know, I think we had a lunch, if I remember right, not with Hubert, but me and Steve and the band. And then the band and me went and checked in at our hotel, which wasn't the Peabody. It was a cheaper hotel. And but Steve said, hey, once you get checked in, do you want to go meet Hubert? He's staying at the Peabody, and meet him and talk to him before the show. And I said, yeah, of course, you know. So I wanted to make sure I had my set list with me and that he approved of everything and everything was good. And so he walked into the Peabody, and I was nervous, man. I was, you know, it was like, you know, this is the real stuff here.
The real deal. You're dealing with the real deal now.
It's like a pinch yourself moment.
Yeah.
You know? Yep. And so we're walking up to his room, and Steve knocked on the door, and I had the set list in my hand that I had made up. And because I'm just thinking in my head, he's gonna want to talk business and want to know what we're doing, and you know, this and that. And he answered the door, and you know, he hadn't exactly cleaned up yet. He was a little bit disheveled and stuff. And he opened the door and big smile. Hey guys, man, come on in. You know, how you doing? I said, hey Hubert, man, it's an honor to meet you. He's like, oh Sean, man, thanks for doing the gig. And you know, have a seat, relax, you know, and stuff. And I said, man, it's so nice to meet you, and thanks for thinking of us for this show. And I said, I want to run the set list by you. I just want to make sure you're okay with the set list I came up with, you know, that the band and I came up with. And he goes, man, he goes, I'll look at it, Sean. But he goes, listen, man, he goes, all I want you to do, he goes, I'm not worried about if we make any mistakes or not. He goes, I just want you to let your hair down and let's just have a good time, you know?
Wow.
I said, okay, you know, but he looked at the set list and he goes, man, this looks great. He said, this is going to be great, partner. He used to call me partner, you know, a lot.
Yeah.
And he just instantly made me feel at ease and comfortable and not nervous anymore. And so we hung out for, I don't know, an hour and a half or so. Then I went and got cleaned up for the show. We met back at the venue where we played at the time. And we did the show, and it was, I mean, it clicked, man. It was like, to me, it was like way better than I had ever hoped it would. It was just, and I, by no means, I mean, I was just backing Hubert up. By no means am I going to step on his feet or his toes or anything. He's the man. I'm just there to play rhythm and back him up. He did give me a few solos here and there. He looked at me, give me a nod, and give me some solos. But, you know, it's his show, and we wanted to give him the utmost respect and stuff and let him do his thing. And he had like one of his sisters there. And I think one of his aunts or nieces was there. He had a couple of family members there, I remember. And so after the show, it was like, I don't know, probably 2 a.m. And we were standing out on the sidewalk in Memphis on Beale Street. And he goes, man, partner, he goes, I think the show went great tonight. He goes, I want you guys to be my full-time group.
Wow.
And I go, man, I said, are you kidding me, Hubert? I said, I agree with you. I said, I felt like tonight went excellent. And he goes, yeah, partner. He goes, I need a band. And because Hubert had always been a side man. He never really had his own touring band, you know, he really didn't. And after Wolf died, he took about 10 or 12 years off. He wasn't really playing much. And then that's when Steve Einzig picked him up. started managing them, and kind of really, to be honest with you, Steve put him back on the map, and
so what'd you say when he said that? When you thought about it a little bit, what did you say to him?
Yeah, I thought about it for about 2.5 seconds, and I said, okay. I said, thank you. And I can't believe it. I'd never even left the country, at that point. I just released my first CD previously. And he, of course, he was a very humble, sweet man. And he told me, how much he loved my album and this and that. And I almost didn't believe him. I'm like, I think he's just saying this. But anyways, the first time he took us out of the country, we had a tour through California, through Oregon, through like Seattle and Washington and stuff. And then we went up into Vancouver, BC. And that was my first time out of the country. And I played with him for about 4.5 years through about midway through 2003. And, but in that time span, we toured Japan we did a blues carnival tour, I think it was called. And it was us, Hubert and my band touring with Otis Rush and Magic Slim. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm standing in line to get on the bullet train in Tokyo, and Otis Rush is standing in front of me and Magic Slim, and we're riding on the bus together and we're in the bullet train together. And
you're pinching yourself again.
I'm going, yeah. And I'm in Japan. And I'm going, what the, and we toured Europe and England and stuff like that. And, I kind of consider that 4.5 year stint with Hubert as like my college education in the blues. He taught me a lot about blues, obviously, and music, but I also learned from him about how to be humble. And one of the things he taught me was, whether there's 10 people in a club or we're at a festival playing for a few thousand people or however many people, those people worked all week and they paid the ticket to come see the show. So always give them your always give them your best. So even if you're playing for 10 people, play like you're playing for 10,000. He taught me a lot of good lessons, and it was a very monumental and special time in my life and in my career.
Yeah, and it's helped. Think about what it's done for you all these years now since.
Oh man, big time. Big time. It was just something that and it was one of those things where they say you're in the right place at the right time.
Well, let's talk about another right place at the right time. Your current rhythm section.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how that happened. And again, you're with a blues great first off. Then you're with a rock. Let's talk about the rock side of it, or the blues rock side of it.
So the first time I met Savoy Brown was in 2019. And we had done a festival called the Bowl Full of Blues in Newton, Iowa together. And I was at the merch table. And at this time I had, I believe, 7 original albums out. Maybe, yeah, that's about right. 7 original albums out at that time. And so I was at the merch table selling merch. We played before Savoy Brown. And Pat DeSalvo, the bass player for Savoy Brown, came up and kind of tapped me on the shoulder. My wife usually tours with me and handles the merch sales. So she was doing the sales. I was off to the side, signing stuff and meeting and greeting and saying hi to folks. And guy tapped me on the shoulder. He goes, "Are you Sean?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm Pat DeSalvo, bass player with Savoy Brown." I go, "Man, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for introducing yourself and stuff and saying hi." He goes, "Well, Kim Simmonds would like to meet you. And whenever you're done doing what you're doing, just finish selling your merch. And then I'll take you backstage to meet him." This was probably 30 minutes before their show, in between our sets. I was like, "Kim wants to meet me. I want to meet Kim." So anyways, I spent about another 5 minutes at the merch table, and then Pat took me backstage to meet Kim. He introduced me to Kim, and then he shut the door and left, and it was just me and Kim sitting right next to each other. And he had a really cool scarf on, and he had a jacket, and he was dressed really cool. And we just talked for like 20 minutes, and he one of the things I remember him telling me was the importance of your fans. He's like, my fans have paid for everything. They paid for my shoes. They paid for my outfit. They paid for my guitars. They paid for my amps. I mean, so always play for your fans. Like, he just instinctively, I think, gave me a little bit of advice. And I was picking his brain a little bit, asking him some questions and stuff. And so I was originally planning on staying for about half of their set, because we were on the road and we had to get up early in the morning and leave the next morning. And I think we had a 6-hour drive or something.
And you stayed the whole set.
I stayed the whole entire set. You're exactly right. And I was just, Pat and Garnett and Kim just killed it. And I was just mesmerized, to be totally honest with you. And there's some stairs that led up to, on stage left, there were some stairs that led up to the stage. And I just stood about 3 or 4 stairs up and kind of watched the show from there, from the side of the stage. And then before you know it, the show was over and Kim walked down the stairs with 2 of his guitars. And I said, "Hey, I'll carry one for you if you want." And he goes, "Oh man, if I would have known you would have been here the whole time, I would have asked you to come up and play one with us." And I said, I appreciate it, but I said, I just enjoyed watching you guys, man. You guys did an amazing job. It was incredible. And so we went back in the backstage again in the green room, and he was telling me about his Les Paul, and we were just talking and stuff like that. And then COVID hit in 2020. I'd recorded a record. My 8th record was called "That's What I'm Talking About," and it was a tribute to Hubert Sumlin. But we recorded it in March 1st through March 7th, 2020, in New Jersey, where my label at the time, the studio was, American Showplace Records. And shortly after the record was done, my producer, Ben Elliott, an engineer who had done my 6th, 7th, and 8th album, Trouble and Whiskey was my 6th, Welcome to My Blues was my 7th, and then the 8th, the tribute to Hubert, That's What I'm Talking About. Sadly enough, he sent me the masters shortly after we did the record. He mixed it and mastered it, and then he passed away.
Wow.
And he had been fighting lung cancer before that, but supposedly he was out of the woods. So at the time he passed away, that was back right when COVID was hitting big time, especially up in like New Jersey and New York area in 2020 of March, and they didn't really have time to really, a lot of people involved that know Ben and that were part of that record label, American Showplace Records, feel like he probably died from COVID, but they said it was from a collapsed lung on one side and then a lung infection on the other side. But supposedly he was out of the woods from lung cancer. Long story short, I ended up getting picked up by Cordo Valley Records, which is Savoy Brown's on that label, along with a bunch of other great artists. I mean, Paul Rogers, Edgar Winter, Tom Hambridge,
Deborah Bonham is on.
Yeah, and Deborah Bonham as well. Yeah.
I did a great interview with her as well. You should watch that one of these days.
Oh, I'll check that out, man, for sure. Yeah. So, kind of getting off track a little bit, but that's the first time I met Savoy Brown. And then, shortly after that, Kim came down with cancer, and not a lot of us were playing at the time because of COVID.
That was 21, 22, right in that period.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So around the end of 21, maybe beginning of 22, I was going through some changes with my band, and Kim wasn't playing a whole lot, and they actually had to cancel some shows due to his illness. And so I asked Pat and Garnett, because Pat lives in Orlando. He's from New York, like Garnett's from New York, but he relocated to Orlando. So he's only a couple hours down the road. So he started coming out to a lot of our shows and stuff. And he would sit in and play, and it seemed like him and I had a chemistry playing together, And so all of a sudden I was going through some changes with my band. My bass player had to move to Ohio to help take care of his wife's son, who was really sick. He's still up there, actually. And we were all going through changes. So I brought those guys on to do some shows. And then I had a tour in Europe, a full-blown tour, October 2022 in Europe. And I asked the guys, Pat and Garnett, if they wanted to do the tour with me. And they said, yeah, We all really have this good chemistry because Pat and Garnett are not only great players, but they're great people, and we have a good chemistry off the stage as well as on the stage. And so that was our first tour in 2022, October. And I can remember we had Kim on the phone a couple times on a day off. The guys would call him and we'd put him on speaker and talk for 20 or 30 minutes, And kind of like you said earlier before I think we went on the air, how you guys talked so long and he loved to talk to you about stuff and everything.
Oh, yeah. He never stopped. It was great.
Yeah. So I can remember talking to him a couple times when you in Europe in October 2022. And he just said, man, I'm just so glad you guys are playing together. It seems like you got a great chemistry together. And, Kim told me that he liked my music, and stuff, which was very flattering, of course, and stuff. And he was just a super great guy, not to mention, a hero of mine growing up. So we did that tour. Kim gave us his full support. And he actually told us, keep the music going, you guys, until I get better, just keep the music going and keep doing what you're doing. And then, when I'm out of the woods, we'll do some shows together and stuff. And unfortunately, a couple months later, just like it was December 13th, 2022, shortly after that tour, he passed away. So with that being said, Pat and Garnett and I are still playing together. And it's been a real honor not only playing with them, but it's been a good learning experience. They keep me on my toes, man. They push me in the right direction,
Talk about what we were talking about earlier about he was thinking about coming back and you almost had an opportunity to play.
Yeah, well, Savoy they had some shows booked and that they had canceled. And then Kim, he wanted to keep going, man. He was a fighter. He was a survivor, and he was a real musician's musician. He was a real deal,
Yeah.
And so they had a few more shows booked, and they expressed some interest in maybe having me front Savoy Brown, and because Kim, like I mentioned to you before when we were off air, started to get neuropathy in his hand, so he couldn't necessarily play guitar, but he could still put a slide on his finger and play some slide. And the guys said that he could play harmonica too. And they said, if you want to front some of these shows and do the singing and take some leads and stuff, Kim can play some slide and play some harmonica. And I was all for it. I was like, man, you don't have to ask me twice. I'm in, whatever you guys want, And unfortunately, he passed away shortly after that. So those shows were canceled and it never came to fruition.
Well, just think, you've been in the right place at the right time twice in your life already. How's that?
Yeah, man, it's been a blessing, man. I'll tell you, it's I look back on stuff. I think first, where's all the time went, But yeah, I look back and I think, man, if I were to be gone tomorrow, I've done so many things that I've already dreamed about doing. Played with a lot of my heroes, traveled the world, and just been really lucky, really fortunate in the business,
So is the new live album with those two guys now? That's the only record you have with them, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, good question. We were touring last year. We did a tour in April for a few weeks. Then we came back home for a couple weeks. Then we went back up to the Northeast for a few weeks in May. And May 2nd, we played Daryl's House Club. Of course, Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates has a club in Pawling, New York, which is kind of actually out in the country. Really cool venue, man. Nice, scenery out there, nice vibe outside and inside. Great sound system in there. Peter Moshe is the sound guy, and Peter Moshe still works with Daryl Hall. He's worked with him for over 30 years, and he does all like the Daryl's House show, TV shows, does the audio for that. So he was mixing sound, and my label had called me a couple months earlier and wanted to know if I was ready to do my second album. And I was a little unprepared. And I said, yeah, it might take a few months once I get back off the road, 2 or 3 months, just to put all my ideas together. And they said, well, why don't you just do a live record while you're out on the road? And Daryl's, I thought that was a great idea because the last live album I did was in 2011. So I thought, yeah, a live album would be good timing too. And so it turns out Daryl's House Club is totally set up to do live recordings, videos. Matter of fact, Savoy Brown did a DVD live from Daryl's House Club years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So we said, well, let's do a live recording from Daryl's House Club. And that's what we did. And the band was on fire. I mean, everything was clicking that night. And it was, yeah, like you said, it's my second live album, but my first album with Savoy Brown Rhythm Section with Pat and Garnett. And I'm really happy with the album, man. I'm excited about it. It comes out on February 28th, and very happy with everything so far.
Yeah, and I'm going to feature the whole thing on the show this weekend. How do you like that?
I really appreciate it, John. Really, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
The whole record from cover to cover so people get to hear it.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
Album side radio still I'm doing after all these years. All of it.
God bless you. God bless you, man. Keep up the great work. I tell you, and I really appreciate what you're doing for
Thank you.
You know, the blues and music in general, and not just us musicians, but the fans, man. They love tuning in and watching what you're doing, you know.
There's a lot of fans out there. You'd be surprised. There's a niche audience of people that just love to hear the blues because there's no more rock radio. There's no more the stuff that we grew up listening to is not on the radio anymore. So blues is the closest thing. And when you have a great blues artist, they love it. They eat it up.
Yeah, that's right. Like you said, it is a niche, but once the blues grabs a hold of you, man, it's it's hard to shake it off. So
here's a tough question for you, a real tough one.
Okay.
Now that you have a live album, have you been working on anything with these guys for a record that's not a live album, a new record?
No, that's a good question. I do have some ideas in the can, and some of the guys, Pat's written a few songs, and Garnett and Pat and myself at some of the sound checks we've done at shows have went over some ideas. So we have a few rough ideas recorded, and what I'd like to do, and the band seems to be with me on this, is this album comes out this month on the 28th of February, 2025. And I'd like to follow it up within about 10 or 12 months with a studio album.
And that's why I asked, because I know that you've been playing with these guys for now a little while, 3 or 4 years now.
Well, it's been about 2.5 years. Yeah.
3 years. Yeah. 2.5 years.
Yeah. So I want to follow it up because, part of the deal with the music business is you got to keep your momentum going. If you wait too long to do another record, to do another tour, people tend to forget really quickly about you, So yeah, we want to keep the momentum going. We're starting to build some momentum, and we want to, do all the right stuff. And once this comes out, hopefully people will really like it, and then we'll back it up with a studio album in about a year or so. That's the plan right now.
So, tell me a Hubert Sumlin story.
Oh man, where do I start? He was the best storyteller of all time. I mean, I'll tell you what, because I told you, how my first influence was Hendrix, Red House.
Yeah.
He told me one of my favorite stories that he told, and he told us stories every night. He was the best storyteller. But he told me a Hendrix story about the first time he ever met Jimi Hendrix. And I said, man, lay it on me. And he goes, me and Wolf were playing this club in London. It held about 250 people. And he said it was packed to the stage. I mean, people were just pressed to the front of the stage, and there was smoke in the air, and we were having a good old time. And he said Wolf wasn't really the kind of guy that would let people sit in a lot. He wasn't the kind of guy that had a bunch of people come to sit in, although people wanted to with him,
Yeah.
And he goes, we hadn't heard of Jimi Hendrix at that time. This was it was in the 60s, 66 maybe. I'm just guessing. It was before Hendrix was really popular.
67 probably. 60.
Yeah, it could have been 67. Yeah. In that time range. So he said we were playing the show. And just to back up a little bit, Hubert played with a pick when he played with Howlin' Wolf. And Wolf wanted to play with his fingers because he thought it had a better sound and better attack. And there was a couple times Wolf fired Hubert because he said, "Come back when you learn how to play without a pick," you know. And sometimes they had about a 20-year age difference.
Yep.
And so it was like a father-son relationship, the way Hubert explained it to me. And he said if they would get in a quarrel or something like that, or some kind of misunderstanding, Wolf would fire him. And then he'd call him the next day and hire him back, you know. And Wolf and Hubert used to say, you know, you're fired, you're hired, you're fired, you're hired. You know, it was like a thing, a little inside joke he had. And so anyways, they were playing this club in London, and this guy is making his way through the crowd and kind of breaking his way through the crowd to get to the front of the stage. And Hubert said, man, he had this afro, and he had on like a tie-dye bandana and a tie-dye kind of shirt. And he said, we didn't know who he was, but we knew he was somebody, you know?
Yeah.
And he said he was just standing at the front of the stage staring at Howlin' Wolf. And he said Wolf didn't even ask him a question, didn't say anything. He just took off his guitar and said, "You want to play my guitar?" And Jimi Hendrix jumped up on stage and started playing, you know. And Hubert said, man, he said he went to playing behind his head, playing behind his back, playing with his teeth, doing all that stuff. And I go, man, that's unreal. That's incredible. And he goes, but Sean, he goes, you know, the first thing I thought of that went through my head was, I go, what? He goes, I'm fired. He thought Wolf was going to hire Hendrix, and then he would be out of the picture. But wow. Man, he had so many of those kind of stories, man. He was just a sweetheart of a person and such a great storyteller, and absolutely the real deal. You know, one of the best Chicago guitarists of
all time.
Yeah.
So where do you see yourself in the next 3 years, 5 years?
Hopefully, you know, still healthy and happy and playing music. You know, it's really hard to tell in this world, you know, right now, and in this crazy business where I'll be exactly in 3 to 5 years.
It's a crazy business, I can tell you.
Yeah, it's got crazier, but just like a lot of businesses, not just the music business. But I'd like to still be playing guitar and writing music and playing live shows and doing what I love to do.
How do people find out about you?
Well, you can go to my website for starters. It's www.seanchambers.com. And there's all the tour dates are there, any information, updated information, information on the new album is there. You can also go to, on social media, Sean Chambers Music on Facebook, Instagram, just Sean Chambers. And then come February 28th, when the album's released, it'll be available on all the streaming platforms, Pandora, Spotify, etc. And then in all the typical online retailers like Amazon and iTunes and, you know, stuff like that. So.
Well, Sean, I want to say thank you for spending some time with me today.
It's been my pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
If I can get you guys up in the New England area, you can come and play on my show if you want.
I'd love it. I'd love that. Yeah, matter of fact, we'll be up around that area. And
well, you're going to be up in New York area.
We'll be up there in this May, actually, in a few months. So maybe we'll have to touch base. Maybe we can, if you have a slot available or something, maybe we can stop in.
Yeah, we have a full studio. I have an engineer. We have engineers because I work at UMass Lowell, University of Lowell.
Nice.
Mass Lowell, and the engineers we have are sound recording techs. They go to school.
Well, that's convenient. Well, man, it'd be an honor. We'd love to do it. I'm sure Garnett and Pat would.
Yeah, when I mentioned it to Garnett, he said, "Yeah, we'll have to swing by if we're in the area."
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll be in the area in May. We'll be doing some shows in New York and New Jersey and stuff. So
yeah, if you're in, you know, the Massachusetts area, you come up here. I'd love to have you.
Man, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. We'll take you up on it.
All right. Thank you. And I'll be in touch. I'll be in touch. I'll get a hold of all your contact info, and we'll swap info.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, John, once again, and keep up the great work, man.
Thank you. You too. Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. See ya.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.